usually has a big balance.
Very good. Thank you, and thank you all for being here again. I want to share with you a story that will demonstrate the importance of what we're talking about this evening. In 1991, the Oakland Hills, which are on the east side of San Francisco, experienced an horrific firestorm that resulted in the loss of 2,800 homes, killed 25 people, and left thousands of folks homeless. That event was chronicled in our newspapers in the Bay Area for many years. And a few years after, there was a story that really caught my attention. Peter Scott was a young man who had lost his mother in the fire. She was 85 years old at the time. And as he was recounting what occurred, he made this very poignant statement. He said, "If our neighborhood had talked with one another before the way we talk after the fire, this never would have happened." And then he said, "My mother died because no one knew she was there. If people had known she was there, she never would have died." This program provides a wonderful opportunity to talk, to visit, to get reacquainted with one another. We know as we look at disasters that people do better in the response when they know one another. In the emergency management community, that's one of the reasons that we drill and exercise all the time. We need to understand how our plans are going to work, but the true value comes when at 2 o'clock in the morning, as we are engaged in responding to a disaster, if I know you and you know me, and we have an understanding of the skill sets that we jointly possess, we feel a lot more confident and much more competent in our abilities as disaster responders. So one of the great benefits that will come from this program is you will get to know one another better in the process. We're going to be talking tonight about your neighborhood and the impacts that disaster can have upon it. So I think it's important that we start with making sure that we all understand what disaster is. Let me ask you the question, what is a disaster? How do we define it? And in particular, what is it that separates disaster from emergency? We call our emergency responders 911 emergency responders. There's typically 4 of them when we think about that. Who are those 4? Fire and police and utility folks. And who's the last one?
Medical.
Our medical folks, EMS, exactly right. So we've got police, fire, medical, and utility people. Here's a scenario. You return home this afternoon, about 2 o'clock, let's say, and something occurs either to someone you love or to your property such that it overwhelms your personal capacity to take care of it. What are we all trained to do when something like that happens at home? We pick up the telephone, we call 911, and in 3 to 5 minutes we'll have police or fire or medical or utility folks there to help us out. Is that a disaster or an emergency? Emergency, which is why we call them our emergency responders. Same scenario occurs when you return home at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Only in this instance, the causal factor is a significant earthquake. But it results in something happening to somebody that you love or to your property beyond your capability. What's your normal response? What do? We call 911. Only in this instance, what happens? It's busy, it's jammed, we get no signal. The bottom line result is no one is able to come. Disaster or emergency? Disaster. And that's what we're talking about. I would like you to keep that in mind as the context for our conversation today. Things happen in disaster beyond our personal ability to take care of them. Bad things, people can be hurt, stuff can go wrong at our property, we need extra help, but in a disaster, 911 has been overwhelmed. So the critical question becomes, who at that point responds to the disaster? Who become the responders?
Friends and neighbors.
We do, exactly right, we do. And that's why we've gathered here today, to help us to be prepared for those very events when normal 911 emergency responders have been overwhelmed. I would like you to think, as we have that context of disaster, about your specific neighborhood. Wayne, would you remind us, please, the bounds of the neighborhood that you have invited to the meeting, and visualize that in your mind, because when we talk about a disaster response, that's the area that we're talking about. Who did we invite today, Wayne?
The people that
Pause the DVD, and your facilitator will distribute the Map Your Neighborhood handouts and discuss your neighborhood's boundaries. You have 2 minutes for this discussion. Pause now.